I want to start getting to know each other a little bit this morning, so shout out for me, maybe in this section first. If I ask you the question, where are you from? Ohio? Okay, I'm going to get to you in a second. Just wait, I'm coming back. Indiana? Washington? Wow. New Mexico? There really are no natives in Arizona. Just me. Native? Yes, me too. Another native. Is it just not fun to say you're from Phoenix? Is that why you didn't? Okay. And what about this group? California. Kansas? Man, Iowa, Oregon. Are there any duplicates in this section? Buffalo, Michigan. Holy cow. We're all over the map here. I did not expect this. What about here? Arizona, LA, Michigan, multiple places. Okay, I'm going to come back to you in a second, too. What about over here? Wisconsin. Texas, I didn't hear that one. Iowa, Wisconsin. New York, Arizona. New Jersey, Nebraska. Man, we are really all over the map. So anyways, thanks for conglomerating in Phoenix. I'm born and raised here. So she asked the question when I asked, do you mean where I was born? How many of you answered where you were born? Okay. And what question did you ask, Sharon? Okay, many places. So if I had to ask you where are you from, how would you answer that? Would you answer where you were born, or would you answer the place you live now, or would you answer the place you live the most? Lots of places. You would just answer lots of places. Can you guess military? Anybody? Military. Okay, so there you go. Yeah. If there were snowbirds that were still here in Phoenix, which they're not, they're all gone. It's too stinking hot. If there were snowbirds and I asked them where are they from, they would probably say the state that they live in most of the year. And then I'd say, no, where are you born? Oh, yeah, well, I was born over here in this state. Okay, here's the point. We're going to ask this question today, where's Jesus from? And it's the same question that the crowds are asking. And the problem is that if I ask you the question, where are you from, and you give me the state that you're born in, that's a legitimate answer. If you give me the state that you've primarily resided in and grew up in, that's also a legitimate answer, but they may not both be the same answer. If you're a snowbird and I say, where are you from, and you say, I'm from Iowa, but you didn't grow up in Iowa and you weren't born in Iowa, but that's where you live now and you're a snowbird, and that's also a legitimate answer. But the point is that there's three different answers to that potential question. So the crowd is doing the same thing with Jesus. They're trying to figure out where is he from. And they know this much about Jesus. And so they're trying to put the pieces together, but the reality is some people are talking about where he was born, and some people are talking about where he was raised, and other people are like, we have no idea where Jesus is from. And so not knowing the full answer to that question is going to cause the crowds to be confused and off. So we're going to walk through that with the crowds, and then we're going to figure out where Jesus is probably from, which you probably already mostly know. So we're going to talk about why that's important. You all could probably answer that question. Where is Jesus actually from? So here's what's happened in John chapter 7 so far. Jesus has gone up to the Feast of Booths. It's in Jerusalem. The last feast he was in Jerusalem, he caused all kinds of ruckus in John chapter 5, and now he's back in Jerusalem, and the people are waiting for him, and they're expecting him to show up, and he does show up, and eventually he starts teaching, and the crowds are amazed. How is this guy so proficient? How does he know this many things? They're amazed by his teaching, and Jesus says to them, my teaching is not my own, but his who sent me. And essentially he's saying, I speak directly from God. My teaching's not my own. I speak from the one who sent me. And back in chapter 5, he said pretty clearly, I am from the Father. I am from God. And so now in chapter 7, when he says, my teaching is from the one who sent me, and they're like, oh, last time he was here, he claimed to be from God. So he must be saying that his teaching is also from God. And Jesus also calls out their hypocrisy. There's some people in the crowd who want to kill him. And so he just calls them out. You want to kill me. You want to kill me because you think I violated the Sabbath, even though I didn't. And the crowd denies that. We don't want to kill you. Maybe they're unaware. We'll talk about that in a second. So Jesus defends his actions. Then he gives this verse, which we looked at last week. Jesus says, do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment. And then we're going to roll into these next two sections, which is talking about Jesus being the Messiah and answering two questions. Where is Jesus from? Where is Jesus going? So we'll look at where is Jesus from this week, and next week, hopefully, the person teaching you will look at where is Jesus going. They will, because that's the text. So we're going to look at the first section here, which is where is Jesus from, and we'll talk about why that means he's the Messiah and why that's important for what we believe in and how we live. So that's the question we're answering today. Where is Jesus from? Here's the text, John 7, starting in verse 25, where we left off last week. John 25 and 26, here it is. Some of the people of Jerusalem were saying, is this not the man whom they are seeking to kill? Remember, he's already been at the feast. He's teaching. They're in awe. He's going back and forth with them. And then the crowd say, wait a minute. Isn't this the guy they're seeking to kill? Look, he's speaking publicly, and they're saying nothing to him. Is it that the rulers do not really know? Is it that the rulers do not really know that this is the Christ? And then they were like, really? Is it that they know that this is the Christ? Is that why they're not saying anything to him? Because we heard that they wanted to kill him, but now we're not so sure. I'm going to go back a verse. When you're reading through this story, the interesting thing is John is describing some different crowds within a crowd. So there's a whole crowd in Jerusalem, in the temple, at this festival. But within the whole crowd, there's a mixed crowd. I've been saying this the last couple weeks. Jesus is speaking to a mixed crowd. In this verse, let's just call them the Jerusalemites. Some in Jerusalem are confused. Why do they say they want to kill Jesus, but then they're letting him speak openly, and they're not doing anything about it? They're just confused. Do they really know that this is the Christ? Have they changed their mind? They're guessing. They're essentially confused. If you were to go back to John chapter 7, verse 1, you would see the Jews, and the Apostle John describes them as hostile to Jesus. After these things, Jesus went walking in Galilee, for he was unwilling to walk in Judea because the Jews were seeking to kill him. So there's some people in the crowd who are confused. There's other people in the crowd who want to kill Jesus. If you look at verse 20 in John chapter 7, which we looked at 2 weeks ago, the crowd answered, you have a demon who seeks to kill you. This is the part of the crowd that is either in denial, we're not trying to kill you, Jesus, or they're completely unaware that there's this sting operation going on to try to arrest Jesus and get him killed. So there's some unaware people that think Jesus may just be demon-possessed. There's some confused people, and there's others who want to kill him. We're not going to get to it this week, but if you go forward to verse 32, you'll see that the Pharisees, they respond somewhat fearfully. They send people to arrest him because they heard the crowds muttering, and they want to seize him and arrest him because they're scared. What if we let Jesus keep talking like this? What if we let people keep following him? What's going to happen to our power? What's going to happen to our authority? So when I say a mixed crowd, I mean a mixed crowd. There's all kinds of different feelings about who Jesus is. And I was reading this, and I'm thinking, welcome to 2020. I mean, how far off are we from that? Some people live and they're confused about Jesus. Some people are like, let's crucify Jesus. He's the worst thing that's ever happened to history. And there's other people who are scared. What if he really is God? What if he's not God? I don't know. And there's other people who are just like straight confused. Maybe there's some people who think that they're in denial about Jesus. They know the truth, but they're in denial. And then there's other people who are unaware. They've never even heard the gospel. I mean, we're not very far off today as the crowds were that Jesus was speaking to. I don't think we're far off at all. But let's keep going. Oh, man, I had these all on slides. If you want to fill those all in and you didn't get them, here they all are. Have I mentioned I struggle with sermon guides and PowerPoints? If you come upstairs and listen to me teach at Intersect, I don't have any of this fancy stuff. And so I just get off talking, and then I'm like, oh, man, I made slides for all of this stuff. Oh, man. Okay, you have like 10 more seconds for all you blank filler in people. Mike, this is for you. Mike comes in this morning and says, "Are you going to follow this today?" And I said, "Yes," and then failed miserably. So anyways, mixed crowd. Jesus is talking to a mixed crowd here. Next verse. This is what Jesus responds to the people. Oh, no, we're not there yet. I'm jumping ahead. This is what the people conclude their logic based on their knowledge. We know where this man is from, but whenever the Christ may come, no one will know where he is from. So 2 things going on here. Number 1, the crowd knows that Jesus is from Galilee. Can I borrow your microphone? The crowd is pretty convinced that they know that Jesus is from Galilee. And the reason why they know that Jesus is from Galilee is because the way that he speaks. Who said on that side of the room that they were from Texas? Okay, so when Les speaks, it's hard to know that you're from Texas. I don't know how long you've lived here for. But I'm going to ask Mun back here to read John chapter 7, verse 27. Mun, where are you from?
Vietnam.
Okay, will you read verse 27?
27? Okay. However, we know where this man is from, but when the Christ comes, no one knows where he is from.
Okay, I'm from Arizona. Mun's not from Arizona. As soon as Mun opens his mouth and speaks, thank you, by the way, that was brilliant. As soon as Mun opens his mouth and speaks, you all are like, wow, he's not from here. Reality is that's what it was like for Jesus, having grown up in Galilee and now being in Jerusalem. He opens his mouth and speaks in the middle of the temple, and they're like, he's not from here. He's from somewhere else. And they recognize his dialect. So whether they've actually talked to Jesus or not, talked about Jesus or not, whether anybody's confirmed that he's from Galilee, as soon as he opens his mouth, they know that guy's from Galilee, because when he speaks, it sounds completely different. So they know that he's from Galilee. But Jewish teaching of the time says that the Messiah, when he comes, would be unknown. The Jews at the time were teaching that the Messiah will probably grow up and not know he's the Messiah. He'll probably grow up and he'll have no idea. He'll grow up like a normal human being. And then at some point, Elijah will come down from heaven and anoint the Messiah. And then the Messiah will then know he's the Messiah, and he'll go on and he'll destroy Roman rule and set up the kingdom, and on and on and on and on. This is what the Messiah will do. So the crowd's confused. We're pretty sure we know where Jesus is from, but we're not supposed to know where the Messiah is from. So they're trying to put all the pieces together. The reality is that they don't know everywhere that Jesus is from. The irony is that they know where Jesus is from, and so that hangs them up. The reason answering the question where Jesus is from is important is because the crowd only knows a portion of where Jesus is from, and that's why they're confused. So Jesus gets up and starts speaking again. This is John chapter 7, verse 28. And when it says, therefore, my Bible says, he said to them, nope, I got to flip the page. Jesus cried out in the temple. And when it says cried out, I don't know what your translation has, but this is literally, he yelled. Standing in the middle of the temple courts, and there's hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, and there's no microphone, and there's no megaphone, and he literally just stands up in the temple and starts screaming so that as many people can hear him as possible. Jesus cried out in the temple, teaching and saying this, you both know me, and you know where I am from. So he's saying, you know that I'm from Galilee. That's accurate. I am from there. I did grow up there. And I have not come of myself, but he who has sent me is true, whom you do not know. I know him because I am from him, and he sent me. Here's the reality. What Jesus just said to the crowd in verse 24, don't judge by appearance, but judge with right judgment, is exactly what they're doing. We're pretty sure that it appears that Jesus is from Galilee. I mean, he opened his mouth and spoke, and we heard it. So we're pretty sure that he's from Galilee, and he is. But he's also from Bethlehem, where he was born. we're pretty convinced that this guy grew up from a baby, that he was conceived from a woman, and that he grew up from a baby, and now he's a man. And they would be right about that. And he was also conceived by the Spirit of God, which is what they don't know. He appears to be human, and he is. But that doesn't mean that he's not also from heaven or from the Father. It appears that he came, and he did, but he also came from God. He also came from the Father. So when Jesus says, do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment, he's talking to the people in the crowd and trying to help them understand that they're about to do what he told them not to do. The reason why people don't know, Jesus says, the reason why people don't know where he's from is because he says they don't know God. Now, we've already seen him say this at the last festival in chapter 5. If you go back to chapter 5, verse 38, he says to the people there, you don't have his word abiding in you, for you do not believe him whom he sent. And then a few verses later, he says, I have come in my Father's name, and you do not receive me. So when Jesus says here in 28 and 29, you both know me and where I am from, I have not come of myself, but he who sent me is true, whom you do not know. I know him because I am from him, and he sent me. You understand why the people are upset at this point? He's standing at a festival where people have traveled hundreds of miles to come and worship a God that he's now saying he stands up and says that he represents. And oh, by the way, if you don't believe that I stand up and represent him, it's because you don't know the God that you traveled hundreds of miles to worship. And we wonder why some wanted to kill him. And that would be nuts to stand up to that group of people and say that in the middle of their festival. And he does. They don't kill him at that time. Here's what the Bible says about that. They were seeking to seize him, but no man laid a hand on him because his hour had not yet come. I don't know what you believe about the plan of God in your life. I don't know what you believe about how he's working it out or how he's going to work it out. But in Jesus' life, Jesus' mother tried to rush Jesus in John chapter 2, and he said, my time has not yet come, and that got put off. And his brothers tried to rush him at the beginning of this chapter, go to Jerusalem, expose yourself, reveal yourself, be known publicly. And he says, my time has not yet come. And so he chose to wait. And here are the crowds trying to rush who he is. The timing of God, the plan of God, it is set in stone. Just know that. If you needed to come here and hear this today, hear me clearly. God is in control no matter what the circumstances look like. Doesn't matter what the crowd say, doesn't matter what family says, doesn't matter what your mother says. God is in control no matter what circumstances look like. And here's the confusion of the crowds. Last verse we'll cover today. Many of the crowd believed in him, and they were saying, when the Christ comes, will he perform more signs than these, which this man has? So here's what the crowd is banking on. We're not really sure whether he's the Messiah or not because we're confused. We think we know where he's from. We think we know where the Messiah is supposed to come from, but they don't really line up. And so that's what they're confused about. But then they've seen the signs that he's been doing. They saw him heal an invalid man for 30 years. Disciples are talking about him walking on the water. The Galileans are talking about him feeding 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And so they're going, well, we're a little bit confused about the Messiah stuff, but when the Messiah comes, is he going to do more signs than this? I mean, this guy's doing signs everywhere. And the reason that they choose to believe is not because they have all their answers figured out, not because they fully know Jesus or they understand every aspect of him. It's simply because they saw the signs, they couldn't deny it, and they said, well, we believe because of this, and we'll figure that out later. I preached the intersex service yesterday online because Nathan, unfortunately, ended up sick. And if you want to know how to believe when you don't have all the answers, that's what I talked about in these verses last week. So you go online, you can watch that at 10 a.m. I won't talk about it today. There's a cool story, but I won't share it because we don't have time. You go online and watch that if you want. Here's Jesus' answer to this question. Where am I from? Man, I'm skipping stuff in my slides all the time. Jesus' answer is, you know where I'm from. All the things that you think you know about me, that I was born in Galilee, grew up in Galilee, I was born of a woman, I'm a real man, I'm standing right in front of you, all those things you believe about me, those are all true. And I'm also from the one who sent me, who is God. And he established the one that he sent him way back in chapter 5. So if you're confused about, well, wait a minute, who is the one who sent him? Go back, read John chapter 5. He explains very clearly who the one who sent him was. So this is Jesus' answer. The question is, why is that important? All right, we're going to talk theology for like 2 minutes. So some of you don't fall asleep and the rest of you are like, oh, thank you. We're going to talk a little bit of theology and then why. The question is, why is it important that Jesus is from God? Number one, if Jesus was sent by God and not from God, he would be like every other Old Testament prophet. Old Testament prophets, if you read them, go back in the Old Testament and read prophet after prophet. I was sent by God, sent by God, sent by God. I'm here from God to tell you this, all this stuff. Everybody's sent by God. But no one in the Old Testament claims to be sent from God. None of the prophets. Some angels claim to be sent from God, but that's completely different than a prophet coming to be claiming he came from God. Second reason it's important that we understand that Jesus is from God. If he's not from God, he is a straight up liar because he just said that he was. And it's important that he's not, because he claimed in John chapter 6, verse 46, not that anyone has seen the Father except the one who is from God. He has seen the Father. So if Jesus comes claiming, I'm from God, and he's really not, number one, he's a liar. And number two, not only did he claim to be the one from God, he claimed to be the only one who is from God, who has seen God. This is all going to make sense, and you're kind of going, why does this matter at this point? It's going to domino. It's about to domino here in just a second. Third reason, Jesus needs to be more than human to accomplish the work of God. Needs to be more than human to accomplish the will of God. Let me show you how this dominoes if we don't understand Jesus as from God. Jesus needs to be more than human to accomplish the will of God. In other words, he must be sinless. The book of Hebrews tells us he was tempted in every way like we are, yet he was without sin. It's the deity side of Jesus that keeps him from sinning. If he wasn't deity, he would be just like you and I, dead in our trespasses and sins. And if we're dead in our trespasses and sins, then it's inevitable that we sin. So if Jesus is only human, he cannot live a sinless life. Watch how this dominoes. If he cannot live a sinless life, then he cannot make substitutionary sacrifice for us. Because he's not sinless. He gets up on a cross, he dies for his own sins. Can't pay for your and my sins because he's paying for his own. See how it begins to domino? There's more domino. We could flesh this out. If he's not eternal, he cannot make an eternal payment to an eternal God. Think about it like this. God is eternal, from everlasting to everlasting. You and I had a beginning point, and then our soul lives on, and we either go to heaven or hell, and we live to everlasting. So if he was only human, this is how much payment he could make. From the time he was created, everlasting going forward. But what about the time before it? You make an offense to an eternal God, you are eternally guilty, forwards and backwards. If he's not God, if he's only human, he cannot fully satisfy the wrath of God. It's impossible. See the domino? Here's why this is important. You go to your LDS friends or your LDS neighbors, and they will tell you that Jesus Christ is a man who became God by obedience to the law. And if that's true, none of these other things can be true. He cannot be our substitutionary sacrifice. He cannot make an eternal payment to God. If he's just like every one of us, he just happened to make the right choices and we made the wrong choices, and he became God and we didn't because we made poor choices. Now he has to die on a cross and save us. It's all messed up. It dominoes into so many other things. If Jesus is only sent by God, he's just like every other Old Testament prophet. If he's only sent by God, he's a liar because he claimed to be from God. And if he's only sent by God and he's not from God, then he cannot even accomplish the things that God set out for him to accomplish here. It is essential that we understand that Jesus is from God. If I asked you at the beginning of this message, where's Jesus from? Most of you could have probably told me, well, I mean, he was born on the earth. He's the God-man. It's the incarnation. He's from God and from heaven, and he came down to earth, and so he's from heaven, and he's from the earth, and you would have already known that, and that's great. I'm glad you know that people were confused about that. The question is, do you understand how important that is to understanding God and salvation and how he interacts with you and I? Some people are not interested in theology. Some people are like, can we stop talking theology? I don't care. How does this apply to the fact that I have to wear a mask when I go to work? Or how does this apply to the fact that I just had a loved one who died and I couldn't spend time with them in the hospital and I lost last moments, and who cares about theology? Because I really truly believe this, that right theology builds hope. It gives us rest. To know that Jesus Christ is from God, it should give you that anchor, that hope, that peace, that rest. To know that he's like us in every way. Even when I'm tempted and tried and I screw it up, I could learn from God because he was tempted, but he didn't screw it up. He did it the right way. And so I can go to him and say, God, I am messing this area of my life up. Teach me, help me, show me what to do. And he could say, I can help you with that. Because I know what the right way is. And I know where you've been struggling and where you've been tripping up. It's important to know that Jesus is from God so that you understand that when he was nailed up on a cross, his sacrifice was big enough, strong enough, powerful enough, eternal enough, that you don't have to walk around questioning, well, am I really saved or am I not? Do you really believe or do you not? Because if you really believe, his sacrifice was enough because he was the God-man. When you believe that Jesus is from God, you start to realize that Jesus had it perfect in heaven. He was with the Father. He was with the Spirit. He didn't need our relationship. He chose to create us. And when we fell, when we chose the wrong thing, that he loved you and I enough to say, I will leave the perfect relationship that I have in heaven with the Father and with the Spirit, and I'll come down and I'll be crucified for no other reason than to save anyone who's willing to come to me. You start to realize that he didn't have to do that. He could have said, you know what? This is the choice you made, and I'll punish accordingly because I'm a just God. But that he literally looked down and said, I want you. And I'm willing to, for a time, give up the perfect relationship that I have in heaven to come down and get you because I know you can't get to me yourself. It should give you rest. It should give you hope. It should give you peace to understand where Jesus comes from. Pray with me. God, thanks for sending your son for us. Jesus, thanks for being willing to come to us. None of us deserve it. And we're so thankful that you loved your creation. We're so thankful that you're forgiving. And we're so thankful that when you came to earth, you didn't shy away from telling us who you were. God, I know that sometimes we just struggle in general. We struggle to see how theology affects our lives. We struggle to see how believing the right thing dominoes into everything else that we believe. But God, I pray that people would hear your word, they would hear the gospel, they would hear the truth, and they would just be blown away at your love, your compassion, what you did for us. That when we take a second to just re-look at what we probably, most of us already know, which is that, Jesus, you're from God. But what depth and what meaning and how much that affects our life, that we could live with hope and peace and rest. God, there's no way that we can say thanks enough for sending your son. There's no way that we could pay the sacrifice that he paid. And so with humility, God, we say thanks and we devote our lives to you. God, teach us in the places where we stumble how to look more like you. Teach us how to be honoring to you, loving children. God, we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.